I went to Reb Meir Moskowitz on Erev Yom Kippur. I just went over to popped in to say hello to him. And he was saying to me, remember, it's supposed to be simcha. There's supposed to be joy. That's like his family tradition to remind me that the days of awe are supposed to have simcha. But I don't know exactly how to, it's something I've been working on these last couple years, which might only have been possible. I don't know if I could have worked on it when I was younger, because I don't know if I would have had the maturity to do it. I'm not that mature now, but I don't think I would have had it, which is to recognize that there's this, the Torah as it's written, it has a certain amount of data, and that data is enough for the most part. I mean, there's still some oral law that we need to know, but for the most part, the data is enough unless you start to get curious. And when you start to get curious and you're starting to look around, then you notice that there's these big empty spaces, which and empty spaces are not a bad thing. Empty spaces are a useful and a fine thing, because it allows you to explore. And then as you explore, you sort of see there's more data than first met the eye, and but still there's these empty spaces. Now, for some people, and maybe some generations, the curiosity, maybe the need for answers, is so pressing that there becomes revelation. This is how I'm experiencing it now. I don't know. This is how I'm telling the story of it. That so there starts to be revelation, from deeper or higher places, however you want to call it, like what we would say is the mystical. But you didn't need it necessarily. You don't need it across the board, but you may personally feel like you need it. And so when you start probing and you really need it, you start to find that there's layers of information. Now, some of this layers might be things you could pick up on your own, and some of it you need mentoring for. And the mentoring is coming from prophets or from other mystics. And they're sort of, providing you with stuff here and maybe stuff there to fill out a picture. But again, would you have needed it? Let's say the nature of the world to come. Do you need a detailed map of the world to come, or you just need to know there is a world to come? So at some point, people felt like they needed more details. And so stuff from that realm starts to come in, and it starts to help you fill out a picture. But the problem is that the realm you're drawing the picture from is not designed to give you a physical picture of it, because it's coming from a kind of mystical realm. It's more of a realm of poetry, but you're so needy. I'm so needy of picture. So I draw a picture, but I'm drawing the picture now from poetry, not from. So, and depending on how needy I am for these things, I can draw a more detailed picture. The problem with the picture is not meant to be used this way, but that's what I'm doing. So I fill in the blanks of what's happening to the soul after I die, and all these kinds of things. And there are books that do this where they have an actual detailed discussion of what happens every minute after a person dies. The thing is, again, they're drawing from a world that doesn't speak this way, and we're trying to translate it into that. And so we come up with this thing, which is satisfying, but it's really not it. Because and so we've done it to Rosh Hashanah, in a big way. We've done it to Rosh Hashanah. We've just, made it like so detailed and so rich through the language of the liturgy and what we embellish and what we add in order to give it more meaning for us. But it's at some point recognizing that, how much of that am I supposed to be holding on to, and is it getting in the way of other stuff that's supposed to be going on, at this time. So I feel like that the Hasidic, movement with it is partially a reaction to that it got, at some point, it just got too heavy and too depressing. But it wasn't that the actual reality is heavy or depressing. It's just that the embellishing that we do to it got too heavy and depressing. So it needed like a change. And, but to me, if Rav Nachman of Breslov or Rav Shner Zalman of Liadi, if they're, saying, switch from this to that, you're focusing too much on this, switch to that, or the Baal Shem Tov, switch from this to that, move to Simcha. So, there's a reaction because I've become so attached to this image that it's hard to let go of it. Mm-hmm. So they think it's funny that a Litvak or a Misnagid or whatever you're going to characterize it, a non-Chassid, can't do it. To them it's funny because they've grown up in it, that this is the image. It never was that, in their mind, it never was that. There never was that thing. And it to the point where they don't even see it. Like, because it's so much not that, it's so much supposed to be about Simcha and etc. They don't even, like when you mention to them, did you read Unasana Tokef? Did anybody hear? So they don't even see what you see, because, and if they see, like when they see Misha Nichnas Av Mematim Besimcha, like that phrase makes it sound like you're supposed to let up on joy, but they don't read it that way, right? And as part of it is, you might, like from a perspective outside of Hasidus, when you're looking at it, you might say they're purposefully ignoring it, but it's not true. They don't see it. They don't see it. They don't see what you see in it because they've moved on to this other thing. Now, the thing is, this other thing also isn't it. In other words, it's not more it than the other way. It's just a way that works. In other words, it's not, let's say the king is in the field. I've heard, Hasidic people talk about the king in the field in ways that makes me nervous. Like, how present he is and how available he is. I heard somebody this year for the first time, I heard somebody tell me that, and they thought it was beautiful, but they said that this person said, it's like Hashem's wearing blue jeans. Right. Like, to me, it caused me to shake when I heard that. I rarely shake.
Right.
It caused me to shake when I heard it. But it's the same thing I do. In other words, it's like I have to take it, but I take things, and for the purpose of connecting and moving into that space, I use my images, and so somehow we both have to, and it's scary for somebody to hear it at a younger age, for sure, that this is just something we're holding on to. This is something that we're doing because it gets us to where we need to go. So we're sort of using it as a stepping stone to get to where we need to go. So like for instance, Moshe Shapiro on more than one occasion would say that when we talk about the deep aspects of Torah, we call it sod. We call it a secret. So when you think of a secret, usually it's some kind of proprietary information that you don't want let out. It's something that, but he said that's not what sod means. Sod, the reason we call it sod is because there are no words for these ideas. They're too deep for words. And so, but the thing is, then we just talk about it. We've just said it's too deep for words, and then we talk about it. Because this is our conundrum. Our conundrum is that in order to get to that next place, you have to talk about it, but you have to still realize that whatever you're saying is not it. You're using these words to get to new words, to get to another words, to get to a place where you don't need words anymore. But in the process of it, and it's the same thing with these images, like the images we have, we're supposed to experience awe. How do we experience awe? We're supposed to relate to Hashem with awe. So how do we choose to relate to Hashem with awe? So on Rosh Hashanah, there's a young man who now is, let's say, in his mid-30s. I've known him since he was, 11. And, he just says to me, I'm having trouble with this king thing. And that Hashem is this kind of king or that kind of king and this thing. And I said it to him. I don't know I only did this with comfort because I know I'm going to be seeing him every day, for the next however many years. But I said to him that the king thing, Hashem's much bigger than king. We just don't have a word. We don't have another word. So we're using king. And also king works for this. Right. And king works for this and king works for that. It's not just for awe, but king is useful for different reasons. It's hardly useful for us because we don't have kings anymore. And it's almost not useful, except I was pointing around to the room. You feel the room because you could feel the room. There was awe in the room. There was somehow awe in the room. So you're not going to get rid of it. If you get rid of it, then there's none of this awe. If you can find another thing that's better than king, we'll switch, I'm sure. But right now, king seems to be the best thing. But always remember, it's just something we're using. It's not it. It's something we're using to get to the next place, We're told awe is one of our main ways of making connection to Hashem. And that this is a time to focus on that. So that's what we're doing. But our liturgy is doing it, and we're trained to, think this way because this is the stepping stone to the next thing. But never think that that's it. The problem was I was saying it to a 35-year-old. It's not. It's uncomfortable for him to hear that it's not it. Because it's not, and it certainly wouldn't be something you could tell a 15-year-old, even though some at some point do. But I'm saying that it's to be comfortable with the idea that this isn't it, that this is a stepping stone to it, and that take it seriously, but don't take it too seriously. This is not an easy thing to say.
Rabbi, I think that was the object of your last, was it Tuesday night? That was what you were trying to get across totally about.
I know. There I was able to suggest urgency because there was a problem, which I think, which Hasidus saw a similar kind of problem. And therefore they just made a switch. I believe, I was talking about this to Mordechai Becher. I really do believe that they consciously, not just subconsciously, that some of these people consciously were thinking, we got to switch, we got to change the focus. It's not just that, maybe it's just something that they were inspired to do and they didn't even know why they're doing it. But I wouldn't be surprised if they just said, we've just got to shift it. And everybody has to agree.
I got the sense this year from learning that Elul to them became almost more important than, in a way, than with the king in the field. I mean, it just seems that it became extremely important, which was strange because I never heard of it. Who thought of Elul when I was growing up? We didn't think of it.
I know. Now it's become very much a part of what you hear during that time. And the fact that Sfardim starts slichos at the beginning of Elul has now become very it's very useful, because you see them already starting their slichos at the kotel. You can have those visuals of 100,000 people at the kotel all saying slichos.
It seems to them that the main tshuva is done in Elul. Yom Din is Rosh Hashanah. That's so you're supposedly.
Well, I've heard it going farther back. Like, I think it might have been Simon Jacobson. I don't remember who was already going back to the 17th of Tammuz. Because you could go back you could make a chain back to the 17th of Tammuz already. Because if Yom Kippur is when we're forgiven for the Chet HaEgel, then the Chet HaEgel is what's starting this whole thing going. So I've heard it go back to the 17th of Tammuz.
Let's hope it doesn't go back to Sukkot. We go back to Sukkot. Rabbi, connected to this, when you said about the empty spaces, you're talking about spiritually, there seem to be empty spaces that are filled. My problem was during COVID, maybe that helped. I was listening to so many podcasts about biology and physics, and really a lot. And that's where my empty spaces in Torah kind of are now. It got too narrow. It wasn't encompassing those things. So that's kind of my problem now. So I don't want to go into it now.
Right. But I also, I mean, I have my things too, but see, the thing is that maybe that was meant to be available in the empty space. In other words, maybe it's not supposed to be completely filled already. Maybe it's okay to have an empty space and sort of explore it, and not to be afraid of where it's going to go if you explore it, because that's another thing, which is especially within the Frum community, the sense that if I have, it's almost like a teenager with too much time. Like parents who, you don't want, especially teenage boys, you do not want teenage boys. Like there are strategies with built into school systems and other kind of things where you just keep those teenage boys as busy as you can for those teenage years, because they're going to get into trouble. So there's almost that kind of feeling about our own minds and our own like spirit, that if we have too much space, we're somehow going to get ourselves into trouble. And so people don't trust themselves. What are you going to do? What are you going to explore? Where are you going to end up? And if you end up in, and to the point where even that's some of what Rabbi Foreman suffers from. Rabbi Foreman has stories about, somebody approaching him. This is at more than one occasion. Somebody approaching him after what he taught and saying, so what is your source for that? And then he'll say, I don't have another source for that. It's just, I followed this process and this is where it led me. And it just horrifies people, because who are you to come up, with your own conclusion, and especially to engage in a process which is not guided every step of the way by somebody from a previous generation. When you end up somewhere, you should be led by the hand. And when you end up somewhere, it should be with a group of people that have been there before.
Yeah.
It's just like a scary phenomenon. So we've almost eliminated the kind of freedom of not knowing, of having a question and never knowing, not knowing for sure if I'm going to arrive at an answer. It's so scary to people. Like if somebody comes up to me, and asks me a question, if I don't have the question right away, that it's not just frustrating, it's actually scary. I see it on the person's face. This now has to be resolved quickly. I was hoping that you're going to be the one. Now I got to find somebody else. I got to find some book. I got to resolve this quickly. Like that space of not knowing what is going to happen after I die. What if I didn't know? What would happen if I didn't know? Somehow the Torah seemed comfortable with that. Why would it be left to the mystical realm, to answer this, when the mystical realm's not good at doing those kind of answers? It's not the job of the mystical realm. So why are we bringing all that kind of stuff in? But this came up recently. Also, like I was talking again to Mordechai Becher. I was talking to him about reincarnation. This has just been something for the last couple of years that keeps on every once in a while cycling back. And so the way I've been putting it lately is, I don't think we believe in reincarnation, which makes people nervous, because every single branch of Judaism, whether you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi or every shade of Sephardim and Ashkenazim, Hasidish, Misnagdish, whatever it is, everybody has stories about reincarnation. But I argued that I don't, I do this as a provocateur. I know we believe in it, but it doesn't seem like we believe in it. And my argument to say that we don't believe in it is that we don't use it to answer the question of why bad things happen to good people. I mean, the Ramchal lists it as one of like 12 answers, but it's the answer. It's the answer. It solves it. It doesn't solve it to the place where I actually know why the person's suffering, but it solves the problem of it. Because if you believe that souls come back in order to fix things that they did before, and whatever they did before is a mystery to the people that are living it, then there is no more problem of why bad things happen to good people. You may ask, is there a possibility that it happens and there's no explanation for it? You might, but why would you even ask it? You saw somebody suffering. You have a likely explanation for it. Move on. The likely explanation is this person's working out something from a past life. That's it. If somebody insists on the problem of why people are suffering, after that explanation, they're just being stubborn. Because the person's working, we're all doing it. That's what we do. We had a past life. We had many past lives. We're still working on stuff. And when we come here, we work out stuff. And it doesn't look beautiful. It doesn't look pretty. And then we go on to the next one, and we go on to the next one. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And that's the nature of things. Because that's Gilgul. That's Gilgul. That's what happens in Gilgul. Right? But we don't do it. Not even the Ramchal, who lists reincarnation as part of it, as a possible answer, doesn't say it's the answer. It does what? Just say. And also, if you ask somebody, if you're present, you could be present with great scholars, and somebody asks you what happens after you die. The chance that they're going to mention reincarnation is so slim. It's so slim. Why? Why don't you teach it to kids? The other stuff is so vague that it's almost like you didn't answer it, because people continue to wonder what's going to happen after I die, even after they've heard it 1,000 times. So why don't you teach them something that is, if we believe that in Gilgul, so it's likely to happen. So why don't you just teach them that? But we don't. So my provocateur, kind of thing is, obviously we don't believe in it. Now, I know we do, but I'm saying, if you look at this, last time I was talking, it's not the first time I talked to him about it, but last time he said, it seems like it's a kind of Torah Hanistar. It's a hidden teaching that was brought in to the non-mystical world, for whatever purpose, but they don't, but even though they brought it in, they only sort of want to bring it in a little bit. They don't want to go full into it. And that they must have, at some point, they must have had guidance not to reveal it at all. Even the first place it's brought up, or I don't know if it's the first place, but a very early place it's brought up, which is the Bahir, the book, the Bahir. So that's a very early work. Let's say it was written in, I don't know, the early Middle Ages. The Rambam already saw it. People like that already were learning it. So it had to be, it's early Middle Ages. So even there, when it's brought up, the way it's brought up is a Rebbe uses it to explain why bad things happen, to people. But the students never heard of it. What if it was something that is, something that we believe in? And why do the students not know about it? Why is their Rebbe telling them about it in a sefer like the Bahir? So that's what Mordechai was saying. This is Nistar. This is, for some reason, at some point, they became comfortable telling us that your soul goes to a holding place, and whatever information is there. And then they became comfortable telling us that there's judgments, that there's a judgment after you die, that there's something called, Olam Haba, and the nature of Olam Haba is like this and like that. At some point, somehow, there was comfort in telling us those details, but not this one, not the reincarnation one. And so he was speculating, maybe because the reincarnation one, the result of the reincarnation one may make it that people don't feel that there's a...
Well, what would happen to tshuva? What would happen to tshuva?
Right. So, but what happens to it now with the world to come? So you could say that what happens with the world to come is that you were impressed that if you don't do tshuva now, you're going to get punished later. Or if you don't do tshuva now, you could be fixed later at what you're doing. All of which is information that's coming from the other realm, from the mystical realm. Right. But I remember one time Ramosha Shapiro was talking to us, a blessed memory, and he said, he was saying, just look around you. Does this look like what Hashem would want, intend, as a final product? Does this look like a fixed place? Does this look like a divine place yet? There's something, just look around you. It already suggests that there has to be a next stage where things get fixed. That was his premise, what he was saying. So then I said to him that if that's the case, you could say the same thing about Olam Haba, because Olam Haba, we're told, the righteous are going to get certain parts. The ones who are not righteous are not going to be there. Weren't they Hashem's creations? Weren't, or this person's going to be at this place. That person's going to be at this place. So he looked me in the eye and he said to me, that's going to be fixed too. Whatever that means. So even those things are something, like they're obviously it's all being drawn from from this poetic world, and it's being drawn in, and we're using it. But maybe that's it. Maybe they were able to bring in some details that would satisfy the need to know more, but in a way that it didn't, like you're saying, it didn't curtail the imperative to do tshuva, or it didn't create an urgency to to be good. But so there are certain Hasidim, like I think in Breslov they talk about a Gilgul more. There are ones, and then they'll say, like, don't worry, you don't want to come back. Like I learned with this guy Rachmiel Drizin, and he said, you have to repeat to yourself, when you die, your soul's going to go up, and they're going to ask you, do you want to come back, or do you want to go to Gehenna? Tell them you want Gehenna. Gehenna is so much better than Gilgul. Just tell them you want Gehenna.
Do you know anyone? I know Rachmiel, but do you know anyone who, if they're suffering, say to themselves, "Boy, was I a sinner in my life"? I mean, I must.
There was a lady. There are people. There was a lady in Spot, and she, by the way, even I remember, even Rav Scheinberg says you could listen to her. There was a lady in Spot who, if you go to her, she would tell you about your past lives and why. She would say, like, you go to her. I don't know if she's still alive. But this was, like 30 years ago. But you could go to her, and she would say, in your past life, you were a very wealthy person who was too attached to his things. So that's why in this life, you're always losing everything.
I love it. Was that Shirley MacLaine?
Remember? No. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
She's bigger. But so, there are people like that will tell you, there were people like that would tell you about your previous Gilgul and why, because it would help to explain something you're going through. Mm-hmm. So they had, and also Reb Chaim of Volozhin, the Vilna Gaon. I think Reb Chaim Volozhin wrote this somewhere, but the Vilna Gaon told him where his soul comes from. He said, your soul comes from this sphera, and my soul comes from this sphera, and that's why I'm your teacher. You need me in order to get to what you had to come to. I had to be the one who teaches you, because you need to go to such and such. So it's not exactly like a previous Gilgul, but it was like, using those kind of things. And again, I don't want to make it sound like I don't think there's anything to this stuff. There is stuff to this stuff. It all has meaning and it all has value. It's not, if I can picture it, it's not it, but it's not nothing. It's not nothing. It's so.
Yeah. Rabbi, my sister-in-law believes in reincarnation very much, Betsy. And she believes that my nephew Ben's youngest daughter, Fiona, is my mother. She says the way her expression on her face, the way she reacts to things, she is your mother-in-law. So I'm going to watch her as she grows up, see what happens.
So the thing would be, are you supposed to show her honor because of Kibbut Av V'Em?
Oh, wow. Although Betsy says you have to watch her, you have to be a little afraid of her. She says that. Anyway.
Yeah. So it seemed like, and then Mordechai he sent me a video from Simon Jacobson, where Simon Jacobson essentially said this, that the reincarnation thing is, it's from the world of, the hidden Torah. And if it's useful for you, use it. If it's not useful for you, you don't need it. And it seemed like he also felt like it tends to be used in a way to mitigate a bad behavior or something.
I see.
Maybe that was a thing about it. Yeah.
Right. It just occurred to me that the reason that Betsy might believe in reincarnation is because she's a ger.
And that's
right?
often an explanation for Gerim that
Yeah,
that
yeah.
that they had to go through some tikkun, which is the conversion, right? Yeah.
Mm.
So it helped me, even that conversation with him and that seeing that thing from Simon Jacobson. It helped me not to be so bothered by why we're not so pushing it so much, but also as part of a general recognition that it's okay not to know, or to have that space and sort of explore other possibilities, and to sort of trust that we're not going to end up in heresy. You don't have to, just because there's an empty space that allows me an opportunity to explore.
Yeah,
Should,
that's the prompt. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
you're
Okay.
allowed to trust yourself. And it's okay to explore. That's the thing. It's supposed to be natural. It's supposed to be natural to explore. It's supposed to be what we're supposed to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left all the empty space. We're supposed to explore. It's okay. It's not bad to explore on our own. And if we end up with a place where it's too hot, like I remember walking with my kids one time, with a couple of my kids, and we were walking near the edge of a road, and there was like a drop off, and I said, be careful, don't go too close to the drop off. Now they weren't like 3; they were like 7 or 8.
Mhm.
And one of my students was walking next to me, and he goes, "Why did you feel you had to say that to them? Do you think they're going to fall off the edge?" But we are constantly, we're so worried about somebody, but we don't trust that people have their own sense and that it's okay to explore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question that came up
Yeah.
last night at
Yes.
totally different? Because
Yeah.
gender seems to be in the news so much. There is the acknowledgement, I guess, that there is hermaphrodites, that there is. What is
Yeah.
their place in, do they go to a minion? Do they not? I mean, what is considered their place in
Right.
that?
There is something, the Gemara says, an androgynous,
Yeah, yeah.
which is an androgynous being. There is an opinion that it's not male, it's not female, it's its own type.
Right.
It's a separate type. So, except that and therefore this is a completely legitimate question to ask. Let's say somebody was identified as an androgynous being. So shouldn't they be able to choose, on their own where to go? Certainly you're not going to not let them daven.
Mm-hmm.
So, my feeling is that, in practically speaking, so it is worth exploring it, I mean, as an interesting subject, but practically speaking, like if somebody came to our shul and we're even let's say they were a transvestite, that nobody's gonna go up to them and tell them you have to move.
Mm-hmm.
No, nobody's gonna tell me you have to move. Now, would they get an aliyah? Let's say it was a woman who wants to be a man. Would they get an aliyah or be counted as a minion? That's another, that's a more
Right,
complex.
right. Well, you
But as
said
far as where you're
transvestite,
sitting,
but
as far as where they're sitting,
yeah.
So the reason I brought up transvestite is because you can tell that it's a male dressing as a female,
Uh-huh.
or a female dressing as a male. Let's say you can tell, and they haven't surgically, the reason I'm saying transvestite,
Right,
they haven't
right.
so there would be, where somebody might feel, look, you're obviously a man dressing as a woman. But I'm just saying, practically speaking, and I'm assuming this would be the case in most shows. I would hope this would be the case. They're not going to say anything. It doesn't violate the whole point of a mechitza is to have a mechitza. It's not you have the mechitza there, and this person is in they're not representing a crowd of people that are suddenly going to show up. Men are showing up in the women's section, or women are showing up in the men's section. They are most likely going to be an individual and who's decided to sit on the wrong side of the mechitza. Even if your opinion is it is the wrong side of the mechitza. So I doubt if that would be an issue at most places. I mean, the fact that they're transvestite would get stares because people are not used to it. But I don't think anybody's going to say anything. But what if it was the other way? What if it was a woman who was clearly a woman who wanted to identify as a man?
Right.
But so they're not going to get an aliyah, and that issue, even if they've transitioned and now they have something closer to the anatomy of a man, or something, or the other way, closer to the anatomy of a woman. So that, the things about who counts for a minion and stuff like that. So that moves into the realm of a legal discussion. But as far as sociologically, I'm assuming that it's not going to
Right.
where they sit is not going to be.
I wonder if an androgynous person, and maybe they did have this role in ancient societies because they were kind of understood both sides. Maybe they should have been a special kind of teacher. I don't know. Just
because they could understand both sides, you mean?
Yeah, maybe. I
Yeah.
don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. It's
A hermaphrodite, if you check the chromosomes, right? They are one or the other, right? It's just that you can't tell. I think
it's
the
just
hermaphrodite,
anatomy. It's
right?
just anatomy.
I think if you check the chromosome, I'm not sure with an androgynous person.
Huh.
And I don't know if that makes it. I mean, I don't know if that makes
I'll
sense.
try to look it up. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Rabbi, thank you so much. Tomorrow? Yes?
Sure. Yes.
When? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Excellent.
All right. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Rabbi, most interesting.
Bye-bye, Estelle. Bye, Estelle.
Most
It's good to
interesting
hear
to
your voice,
listen.
Estelle.
Hi,
Hi,
Very good.
Estelle.
Hi.
Hi.
Bye,
Very
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.